Captain Jake Morrison sat at the back of the briefing room, trying to ignore the snickers coming from his alien crewmates. The massive Zephyrian soldiers, made of living crystal, were whispering to each other in their musical language. Their jokes were always about the same thing: humans and their stupid stories. The battleship Nexus Prime held over 3,000 crew members from 12 different species. Only 3 of them were human. Jake had been proud when he got assigned to this elite unit 2 years ago. Now he wondered if it was worth the daily shame. "Morrison," called out Commander Zalthek, his crystal body glowing blue with amusement. "Tell us again about your thunder god, the one with the magic hammer." The other aliens laughed. The insect-like Cathara clicked their mandibles in what Jake knew was their version of laughter. Even the energy beings called Luminari flickered with what he guessed was humor. "Thor is from Norse mythology, sir," Jake said, keeping his voice steady. "Just old stories from my planet." "Yes, stories," said Vexi, the Kithara war leader. Her compound eyes reflected the room's lights as she turned to face him. "Your people believed a man could control lightning with a metal stick. How wonderfully primitive." Lieutenant Colonel Rick Barnes, sitting 2 seats over, clenched his jaw. Jake could see the anger in his friend's eyes. Major Lisa Carter, the third human on board, stared at her datapad and said nothing. They all knew better than to argue. The briefing should have been about their next mission. Instead, it had turned into another session of human baiting. It happened at least once a week. "What about your dragon stories?" asked Sub-Commander Thys, a tall luminary whose body glowed soft green. "Flying reptiles that breathe fire. Did your ancestors really think such creatures existed?" "They're just myths," Jake replied. "Stories to explain things people didn't understand back then." "Of course they are," Zalthek said. "Your species was so young, so scared of the universe. You made up magical beasts and powerful gods to feel safe." The Zephyrian's crystal form rang like a bell when he laughed. The sound made Jake's teeth hurt. "Tell me, Morrison," Vexi said, leaning forward. "What about your strength myths? The human who could lift mountains? Hercules, I think you call him." "Heracles," Jake corrected automatically, then wished he hadn't. It just gave them more to laugh about. "Ah, yes, Heracles," the war leader said. "A man who could kill monsters with his bare hands. Your people actually passed down these silly tales for thousands of years. At least we have imagination," Rick Barnes said quietly. The room went silent. All eyes turned to the human lieutenant colonel. Rick's face was red, but he met their stares without backing down. Imagination? Zalthek's glow shifted from blue to orange, a sign of irritation. "Is that what you call it?" "Our stories mean something to us," Rick continued. "They teach us about courage, sacrifice, doing what's right. Maybe that's hard for you to understand." Vexi's antennae twitched. "Your myths teach nothing but false hopes. They make your species think you're special when you're clearly not." Lisa Carter looked up from her datapad for the first time. "With respect, war leader, humans didn't ask to join this crew to be insulted daily. You joined to serve the coalition," Thys said, her glow pulsing. "Part of that service is accepting your place. Humans are the newest species to reach the stars, the youngest, the least experienced." "That doesn't mean," Lisa started. "It means exactly what it means," Zalthek cut her off. "Your people spent millennia telling stories about impossible heroes while we built real civilizations among the stars. We traveled between worlds while your ancestors sat around fires making up tales about gods." Jake felt heat rise in his chest. 2 years of this treatment was wearing him down. "Maybe our ancestors were smarter than you think." The crystal commander's form flared bright orange. "Smart? Your species believed in magic, Morrison. You thought men could fly without technology, control weather without science, fight monsters that never existed. If that's smart, I'd hate to see stupid." "The Zephyrians have been spacefaring for 50,000 years, added Thys. "The Cathara for 30,000. Even the youngest coalition species reached the stars 5,000 years ago. Humans got off their home planet less than 200 years ago. And in all that time," Vexi said, "you never grew beyond your primitive stories." Even now, some humans still believe in gods and magic. It would be funny if it wasn't so sad. The three humans sat in silence. There was nothing they could say that wouldn't make things worse. Jake had learned that fighting back only brought more mockery. Perhaps, said Dr. Nixera, the ship's luminary historian, human mythology serves a different purpose than we understand. All eyes turned to her. The elderly scholar rarely spoke during briefings. What do you mean, Doctor? Zalthek asked. I've been studying human culture for my research, she said. Her soft yellow glow grew slightly brighter. Their stories are remarkably detailed for simple myths. The consistency across different human cultures is unusual. You're giving them too much credit, Vexy said. Primitive minds create similar fantasies. It means nothing. Perhaps, Dr. Nixera replied, but I find their mythological persistence interesting from an anthropological standpoint. Jake felt a small spark of gratitude toward the old historian. At least someone wasn't actively mocking his species. Interest doesn't change facts, Zaltek said. Human mythology proves their species was afraid and ignorant for most of their development. They created imaginary powerful beings because they felt weak and helpless. And now they serve alongside truly powerful beings, added Thais. Reality must be quite a shock after all those fairy tales. The meeting finally moved on to actual military business, but Jake barely listened. His mind kept replaying the insults and laughter. 2 years ago, he thought joining a coalition ship would be the greatest honor of his career. Now he wondered if humans would ever be seen as equals. After the briefing, the three humans walked together toward their quarters. None of them spoke until they were alone in the corridor. I'm getting sick of this, Rick said finally. We all are, Lisa replied. But what choice do we have? Jake looked out a porthole at the stars rushing past. Somewhere out there was Earth, where humans told the same old stories their ancestors had told for thousands of years. Stories about heroes and gods and impossible deeds. Maybe the aliens were right. Maybe humans were just dreamers who never grew up, but deep down something in Jake Morrison rebelled against that idea. His grandfather had told him those same stories when he was a boy. They hadn't felt like lies then. They'd felt like memories of something important that had been lost. He shook his head and followed his colleagues down the corridor. Tomorrow would bring another day of service, another chance to prove humans belonged among the stars, even if no one believed they did. Dr. Nixara floated through the ancient ruins, her energy form casting soft yellow light on crumbling stone walls. The planet Kepler 442c had been marked for routine mineral surveys, but what she found here was far more interesting than any metals or crystals. The structures were old. Older than anything she'd seen in 40 years of archaeological work. The weathered stones were covered in symbols that hurt her eyes to look at directly. Not because they were bright, but because something about them felt familiar in a way that made no sense. Survey Team Alpha to base camp, she spoke into her communicator. I'm going to need more time here. Copy that, Doctor, came the reply from Captain Morrison. The human was leading the ground survey while Commander Zalthek remained on the ship. Find something interesting? Possibly, she said, though interesting didn't begin to cover what she was seeing. The wall carvings showed figures that looked almost human, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too strong, wielding objects that seemed to glow with their own light. One image showed a humanoid figure holding what looked like a hammer, lightning bolts streaming from it toward a massive serpentine creature. Another section depicted a being throwing spears of light at winged reptiles the size of buildings. The detail was incredible, far beyond what primitive civilizations usually managed. Dr. Nixara had studied mythology from dozens of worlds. Every species had their hero stories, their legends of powerful ancestors. But these carvings didn't look mythological. They looked historical. She moved deeper into the ruins, recording everything with her scanner. The architecture was strange, too. Massive blocks of stone fitted together without mortar, yet after millennia they still held firm. The builders had known things about engineering that most current civilizations were still learning. In what might have been a central chamber, she found something that made her energy form flicker with shock. a series of panels covered in symbols that looked remarkably like ancient Earth languages. Not exactly the same, but close enough that someone who knew human writing might be able to translate them. Survey Team Alpha to Captain Morrison, she called. Morrison here, Doctor. Could you join me in the central ruins? I believe your expertise might be valuable. My expertise? The human sounded confused. Doctor, I'm just a military officer. You mentioned in your file that you studied ancient Earth languages as a hobby. I need someone who understands human historical writing. There was a pause. On my way, Doctor. 20 minutes later, Jake Morrison entered the chamber with 2 other team members, both Kythera specialists. He stopped when he saw the wall panels, his mouth falling open. These look like... He started, then trailed off. Like what, Captain? Jake moved closer to the walls, his flashlight beam dancing over the carved symbols. Some of these symbols look like ancient Greek letters. Others remind me of Sanskrit. And this section here, it's similar to Norse runes. The Kythera specialists clicked dismissively. Coincidence, said research leader Keth All. Many species develop similar writing systems. Maybe, Jake said, but he didn't sound convinced. He pulled out a small device and began taking detailed scans of the symbols. Doctor, how old are these ruins? I'm still running dating tests, but preliminary. Results suggest at least 50,000 years, possibly older. Jake's face went pale. That's impossible. Humans didn't even have agriculture 50,000 years ago, let alone space travel. According to our records, yes, Dr. Nixara said. Yet here we have structures with writing similar to Earth languages. She floated over to another section of wall. Captain, what do you make of this image? Jake followed her light to a carved scene showing a humanoid figure battling a creature with multiple heads. The being held a weapon that sent streams of fire toward the monster. It looks like Hercules fighting the Hydra, Jake said quietly. But that's just a Greek myth. Look at this one, Dr. Nixara said, moving to the next panel. This carving showed a figure throwing a spear that seemed to create lightning as it flew. The target was a massive wolf-like creature with chains around its feet. Jake stared at it for a long moment. That looks like Odin fighting Fenrir at Ragnarok. But it can't be. These are just stories, are they? Dr. Nixara asked. Research leader Kethal stepped forward. Doctor, surely you're not suggesting these primitive human myths have any basis in reality? I'm not suggesting anything yet, she replied. I'm simply observing what we found. Jake continued scanning the walls, his expression growing more troubled with each image. Figures throwing lightning, controlling fire, battling creatures that belonged in Earth's oldest legends. All carved in stone that had been ancient before human civilization began. There are more ruins like this, Dr. Nixara said. I've been reviewing survey data from other expeditions. Similar structures have been found on 17 different worlds. Have any other teams translated the writing? Jake asked. No one has tried. Most expedition leaders assumed the symbols were decorative rather than linguistic. She paused. I don't think anyone realized how similar they were to human writing systems. Jake pulled out his portable computer and began cross-referencing the symbols with his database of ancient Earth languages. After an hour of work, he looked up with an expression of complete bewilderment. Doctor, I can translate some of these passages. The Kythera researchers scoffed, but Dr. Nixara moved closer. What do they say? Jake pointed to a section of text below the lightning-wielding figure. This part here, it's similar to ancient Greek. Near as I can tell, it says something like, Thunderbringer, Skywalker, Guardian of the High Realm. He moved to another section. This one's more like Sanskrit. It talks about fire spears and void ships. And this Norse-like section mentions something about star roads and world trees. Meaningless coincidence, Keith All insisted. Random symbols that happen to look like human writing. Maybe, Jake said, but his voice carried doubt. Except, Doctor, what if these aren't coincidences? What if human myths aren't myths at all? Dr. Nixara's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. What are you suggesting, Captain? Jake looked around the ancient chamber, at the walls covered with images that matched stories he'd learned as a child. What if our ancestors were telling the truth? What if Thor and Hercules and all the others really existed? Impossible, said the second Kythera researcher. Your species barely understands fire 50,000 years ago. According to our archaeological record, yes, Jake said. But what if that record is wrong? What if something happened to make us forget? Dr. Nixara was quiet for several minutes, her form flickering as she processed the implications. As a historian, she was trained to follow evidence wherever it led, even when it led to uncomfortable conclusions. Captain, I want you to translate everything you can, she said finally. Every symbol, every passage. Doctor, Kethal protested. Surely you don't believe these wild theories. I believe in following the evidence, she replied. And the evidence suggests these ruins predate known galactic civilization by a significant margin. Jake spent the rest of the day working on translations while Dr. Nixara took detailed scans of everything in the chamber. As the hours passed, more disturbing possibilities emerged from the stone walls. The texts spoke of beings who traveled between stars as easily as walking between rooms. They described weapons that could level mountains and ships that could cross the galaxy in days. They told of a time when godlike humans ruled vast stretches of space. Doctor, Jake said as the sun set outside, if these translations are accurate, they're describing a civilization more advanced than anything in the current coalition. I know, she replied quietly. But that would mean humanity didn't evolve into spacefaring capability. It would mean they fell from it. Jake stared at the walls around them, at the images of beings who looked human, but wielded power beyond imagination. The gods weren't gods at all, they were our ancestors. Dr. Nixara's energy form dimmed as she considered the implications. If Jake was right, everything the coalition believed about human development was wrong. Humans weren't the young, primitive species everyone thought they were. They were the descendants of the galaxy's former rulers, and nobody knew what had happened to bring them down. Dr. Nixara had not slept in 3 days. Her energy form flickered weakly as she reviewed data from 17 different archaeological sites across the galaxy. What she was seeing challenged everything she thought she knew about galactic history. Every site told the same story: ancient ruins filled with images of human-like beings wielding impossible power. The writing was always similar to Earth languages, and the technology described in the texts was beyond anything the current coalition possessed. Doctor, came a voice from her laboratory door. Jake Morrison stood there with Lieutenant Colonel Rick Barnes and Major Lisa Carter. All 3 humans looked tired and worried. Come in, Captain, she said. I believe you should see this. The 3 humans entered her lab, looking at the dozens of holographic displays showing images from different worlds. Carved figures throwing lightning, beings riding through space without ships, warriors battling creatures that belonged in Earth mythology. How many sites? Rick asked quietly. 17 confirmed, Dr. Nixara replied. But I've found references to dozens more in old survey reports, places that were noted but never properly investigated. Lisa stepped closer to one of the displays. It showed a carved woman with flowing hair, raising her hands as flames erupted from the ground around her. This looks like Brigid, the Celtic fire goddess. The dating confirms these sites are all between 45 and 60,000 years old, Dr. Nixara continued. They span a region of space roughly 8,000 light-years across. Jake sat down heavily in a chair. An empire. They're describing an ancient human empire that covered thousands of worlds. It appears so, the luminary historian said. But there's more. The technology described in these texts. Captain, your translations suggest these ancient humans possessed abilities that modern science would consider impossible. Rick leaned against a wall. Like what? Genetic enhancement on a massive scale. The texts speak of humans who could live for thousands of years, who could survive in space without protection, who could manipulate matter at the molecular level. She paused. They describe humans as gods because, by our current understanding, they essentially were. Lisa shook her head. But if humans had that kind of power, what happened to it? Why are we starting over from primitive technology? I've been researching that question, Dr. Nixara said. The newer texts, the ones from sites that appear to be only 30 to 40,000 years old, tell a different story. She brought up another display, this one showing carved figures laying down weapons and walking away from great cities. These later sites suggest the ancient human empire didn't fall due to war or disaster. They chose to end it. Chose to? Jake asked. According to these texts, the human leaders decided their civilization had become too powerful. They were preventing other species from developing and growing, so they implemented something called the Great Forgetting. The three humans stared at her. Rick spoke first. They deliberately gave up their power. More than that, they appear to have used their advanced genetics technology to remove the enhancements from their own species. They reduced themselves back to baseline human biology and retreated to Earth. Why would anyone do that? Lisa asked. Dr. Nixara's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. From what I can translate, they believed diversity was more important than power. They wanted other species to have a chance to grow and develop without human dominance. Jake stood up and began pacing. So our myths aren't really myths at all. They're racial memories of what we used to be. That's my theory, yes. Your stories of gods and heroes are degraded historical records of your own ancestors. But Doctor, Rick said, if this is true, why hasn't anyone discovered it before? Surely other archaeologists have found these sites. They have, she replied, but no one made the connection to human mythology. Most coalition species assumed these were remains of some unknown extinct civilization. The similarities to human culture were dismissed as coincidence. Lisa crossed her arms. Because everyone assumes humans are too primitive to have had an advanced past. Exactly. The bias against your species prevented proper investigation. Dr. Nixara brought up another display. But there's something else. Something that may be more immediately concerning. The new image showed a complex diagram covered in symbols. Unlike the other carvings, this one seemed newer, as if it had been maintained over the millennia. What is it? Jake asked. I believe it's some sort of monitoring system. The texts suggest the ancient humans left behind automated systems to watch over the galaxy and their descendants. Rick moved closer to the display. Watching for what? Several possibilities. Evidence that humans were ready to reclaim their heritage. Signs that other species were becoming too aggressive. Threats to human survival. She paused. Or indications that humans were being mistreated by other galactic civilizations. The three humans exchanged worried looks. Doctor, Jake said slowly, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying that your ancestors may have left behind safeguards. Systems designed to respond if humans ever needed their original capabilities restored. Lisa's face went pale. Respond how? I'm not certain. The texts are unclear on specifics, but they mention something called the Heritage Protocol. Before any of them could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency lights bathed the laboratory in red as the intercom crackled to life. All hands to battle stations. Unknown energy signature detected. All hands to battle stations. The four of them rushed to the nearest observation deck. Through their massive windows, they could see something that made no sense. A structure was rising from the planet's surface, something that definitely hadn't been there before. It was a tower of black metal and crystal, impossibly tall and perfectly geometric. Energy cascaded down its sides in patterns that reminded Jake of neural networks. At its peak, a sphere of brilliant light was growing steadily brighter. Commander Zalthek's voice came over the intercom. Dr. Nixara to the bridge immediately. All human personnel report to the bridge. They ran through corridors filled with panicking aliens. Jake could hear fragments of conversation in a dozen languages, all expressing the same confusion and fear. On the bridge, Commander Zalthek's crystal form was glowing bright orange with agitation. Doctor, what have you done? I don't understand, Dr. Nixara replied. The structure appeared 30 minutes after you transmitted your research findings to the Coalition Council. War Leader Vexti said, her antennae twitching rapidly. That cannot be a coincidence. Jake looked at the massive tower on the view screen. As he watched, more lights began appearing along its length, creating patterns that looked almost like writing. "My God," he whispered. "It's responding to something." Responding? To what? Zalthek demanded. Dr. Nixara's energy form flickered rapidly as she processed the implications. "Captain Morrison, you've been studying ancient human languages. Can you read those light patterns?" Jake stared at the tower, at the flowing patterns of illumination that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. As he watched, the lights began to make sense, forming letters and words in a script that looked like a fusion of every ancient Earth language he'd ever studied. It says, "Heritage confirmed. Activation initiated. Stand by for genetic restoration." The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of ship systems. Every alien eye was fixed on the three humans who suddenly found themselves at the center of something they didn't understand. "What does that mean?" Zalthek asked, though his tone suggested he was afraid to know the answer. Jake continued watching, the patterns of light. New words were forming, messages in a language that seemed to bypass his brain and speak directly to something deeper. "It means," he said quietly, "that someone's been waiting for us to remember who we used to be." "And now that we have?" Rick asked. Jake looked around at the alien faces, watching him with growing fear and respect. "Now we find out what our ancestors left behind for us." On the view screen, the tower's light was reaching toward the stars, sending a signal that would travel across the galaxy. A signal that other automated systems hidden on forgotten worlds were already beginning to receive and acknowledge. The great forgetting was ending. After 50,000 years, humanity was about to remember what it meant to be gods among the stars. Jake Morrison woke up screaming. The dreams had been getting worse for 3 days ever since the tower activated on Kepler 442c. Dreams of flying through space without a ship, of crushing mountains with his bare hands, of seeing through time itself. Dreams that felt more like memories than fantasies. He sat up in his bunk, sweat covering his body despite the ship's cool temperature. His hands were shaking, but not from fear, from power. He could feel something moving under his skin, changing him from the inside out. The door to his quarters chimed. "Come in," he called. Rick Barnes entered, looking as bad as Jake felt. Dark circles under his eyes, hands trembling slightly. "You feel it too?" Jake nodded. "Like something waking up inside me. Something that's been sleeping for a long time." Lisa's the same. She lifted a storage container yesterday that should have taken 3 people to move. Didn't even realize she'd done it until someone pointed it out. They walked together toward the medical bay. Dr. Nixara had been running tests on all 3 humans since the tower appeared. So far, the results made no sense to anyone. The ship's corridors felt different to Jake now. He could see stress patterns. In the metal walls, could hear conversations happening 3 decks away. His vision was sharper, his hearing more acute. Even his sense of smell had changed. In the medical bay, they found Lisa sitting on an examination table while Dr. Nixara ran a scanner over her arm. The readout showed cellular activity that shouldn't have been possible. "Your DNA is rewriting itself," the luminary doctor said. "Genes that have been dormant for millennia are activating. Your muscle density is increasing. Your neural pathways are restructuring." "Into what?" Lisa asked. "Into what you used to be, I believe. The heritage protocol appears to be reversing the great forgetting at the genetic level." Jake felt a wave of dizziness and grabbed the nearest wall for support. The metal bent under his grip, leaving finger-shaped impressions in the thick steel. Everyone stared at the damaged wall. Jake looked at his hand in shock. "I didn't mean to." "Your strength is increasing exponentially," Dr. Nixara observed. "All 3 of you are developing capabilities far beyond baseline human norms." Rick sat down heavily on another examination table. "How long before we're not human anymore?" "You're becoming more human," she corrected. "You're returning to your species' original state." The medical bay doors opened and Commander Zalthek entered with War Leader Vexi. Both aliens kept their distance from the humans, a precaution they'd started taking after Jake accidentally crushed a data pad in his sleep 2 days ago. Report, Doctor, Zaltek said. His crystal form was glowing a nervous yellow. The genetic changes are accelerating. Within days, possibly hours, all 3 subjects will possess physical capabilities that exceed anything we've recorded in Coalition species. Vexy's antennae twitched rapidly. And mentally? That's more concerning, Dr. Nixara admitted. Their brain activity is off the charts. They're processing information at rates that should be impossible for organic minds. As if to prove her point, Jake suddenly looked up at the ceiling. Commander, you have incoming ships, 12 vessels, Kythera design, approaching at high speed from the Rigel sector. Zalthek's glow shifted to bright orange. How could you possibly know that? Jake blinked, looking confused. I can hear their engines and their communications. They're scared, talking about the human awakening and whether they should retreat. The bridge communicator crackled to life. Commander Zaltek to the bridge. Long-range sensors detect incoming ships. The crystal being stared at Jake with something approaching fear. You detected them before our sensors did. It's getting stronger, Jake said quietly. Whatever's happening to us, it's accelerating. Dr. Nixara checked her readings again. The tower on Kepler 442c is sending out some form of directed energy. It's affecting all humans within 1,000 light-year radius. All humans? Rick asked. Every human in space is undergoing the same transformation. The Coalition Council is in emergency session. They're receiving reports of enhanced humans from across the galaxy. Lisa stood up from the examination table, moving with a grace that seemed to defy gravity. They're afraid of us. Can you blame them? Vexy said. Your species went from primitive to potentially unstoppable in less than a week. Jake closed his eyes and concentrated. Information flooded his mind, data streams he could somehow access directly. Coalition military positions, ship movements, communication networks. It was all there, open to him like a vast library. They're mobilizing fleets, he said. The Council has declared humans a potential threat to galactic security. Zalthek's crystal body rang with distress. Jake, how are you accessing that information? I don't know. It's like I'm connected to something. A network that's been waiting for us to plug back in. Dr. Nixara's energy form pulsed rapidly. The texts mentioned this. They called it the memory web, a quantum information system that linked all enhanced humans across their empire. You mean there were others like us? Lisa asked. Billions of them, all connected, all sharing knowledge and capabilities. It made their civilization incredibly efficient and powerful. Rick shook his head. No wonder other species never developed advanced technology. How could they compete with a hive mind of gods? That's probably why your ancestors shut it down, Dr. Nixara said. They realized they were preventing all other life from reaching its potential. Jake opened his eyes, and for a moment they glowed with an inner light. But they left instructions. Fail-safes. If humanity was ever threatened with extinction or faced serious persecution, the system would reactivate. And mocking you in briefing rooms counts as persecution? Zaltek asked. It's not just mockery, Jake replied. It's systematic discrimination against an entire species based on false assumptions about our development and capabilities. The ship shuddered as something massive passed nearby. Through the medical bay's small porthole, they could see another tower rising from a distant planet. This one was even larger than the first, its lights visible across space. How many of these towers are there? Vexy asked. Jake's enhanced senses were already providing the answer. Hundreds, maybe thousands. They're activating all across human-settled space. And what's their purpose? Zalthek demanded. Lisa answered this time, her voice carrying new authority. To give us back what we gave up. To restore humanity to its rightful place in the galaxy. Which is? The Crystal Commander asked, though his tone suggested he feared the answer. The 3 humans looked at each other, and in that moment, something passed between them. A connection, an understanding, a shared awareness of their true heritage. At the top, Rick said simply. Dr. Nixara's readings spiked as the genetic changes in all 3 humans reached a critical threshold. Their cellular structure stabilized. their enhanced capabilities locked into place. In the space of a few minutes, they had transformed from ordinary coalition officers into beings whose abilities matched the gods of ancient mythology. Jake stood up, and his movements carried a power and confidence that hadn't been there moments before. "Doctor, how long before the transformation affects all humans?" "At current rates, every human in space will complete the change within 48 hours. Humans on Earth will take longer, but the process has begun there too." Zalthek's form flickered between colors as he processed the implications. In less than 2 days, every member of what the Coalition considered its weakest species would possess capabilities that could reshape galactic civilization. "What happens now?" he asked. Jake looked at his fellow humans, seeing in their eyes the same awakening awareness he felt in himself. The memories of their true heritage were returning, along with the knowledge and wisdom of their ancestors. "Now," he said, "humanity decides what to do with the power we've been given back." Outside the ship, more towers were rising from hidden places across the galaxy. The Heritage Protocol was fully active, and after 50,000 years of dormancy, the children of the gods were remembering how to be divine. The Coalition Council chamber on Arcturus Prime had never seen anything like it. Representatives from 47 species sat in emergency session, their attention fixed on the holographic displays showing the same impossible scene from across the galaxy. Humans walking through space without protection. Humans moving objects with their minds. Humans demonstrating capabilities that challenged the laws of physics as the Coalition understood them. Fleet Admiral Thesaron, the highest-ranking luminary in Coalition space, addressed the assembled delegates. "The situation is unprecedented. In 72 hours, every human in the galaxy has undergone genetic transformation into what can only be described as a superior form of life." A Zephyrian delegate's crystalline form glowed angry red. "Superior? They've become a threat to every other species in the galaxy. The question," said Cathera Hive Queen Zathara, "is what we do about it." On the Nexus Prime, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching the Coalition fleet formations taking position around human-settled worlds. 50,000 ships, the largest military force ever assembled, all aimed at his people. But he wasn't afraid. The fear that had once defined his existence as the lowest-ranking species in the Coalition was gone, replaced by a calm certainty that came from finally understanding his place in the universe. "Captain," Commander Zalthek said, his voice carefully neutral, "Coalition Command is ordering all humans to report to designated facilities for evaluation and possible containment." Jake turned from the view screen. His appearance hadn't changed much, but there was something different in his eyes now, a depth that seemed to contain millennia of knowledge. "And what's your intention, Commander?" The crystal being's form shifted through several colors before settling on a subdued blue. "Honestly, I'm not sure anymore. 3 days ago, you were the species we protected and guided. Now we're the species you fear," Lisa Carter said, entering the bridge. She moved differently than before, with a fluid grace that made every step seem like a dance. Rick Barnes followed her, and Jake could feel the connection between all three of them. Not just friendship anymore, but something deeper, a shared consciousness that linked them to every other enhanced human in the galaxy. "Tito, Coalition fleets are taking position," Jake said. "They're planning to force all humans into containment zones." Dr. Nixara floated onto the bridge, her energy form flickering with agitation. "The Council is debating whether to classify humanity as an invasive species." "After everything we've done for the Coalition?" Rick asked. "We've served faithfully for decades." "You served when you were weak," War Leader Vexi said, her compound eyes reflecting the bridge lights. "Now you're powerful. That changes everything." Jake could feel the thoughts and emotions of his enhanced siblings across the galaxy. Fear from the Coalition species, yes, but also something unexpected. Relief from some quarters, hope from others. "Commander," he said, "request permission to address the Coalition Council directly." Zalthek's form flared bright orange. "That's not possible. Humans are considered a security risk." No enhanced human will be permitted near council chambers. Then we have a problem, Jake said quietly. The lights on the bridge dimmed as power fluctuations ran through the ship's systems. Not malfunction, but the unconscious influence of 3 enhanced humans whose emotions were affecting electromagnetic fields around them. Jake, Dr. Nixara said urgently, you need to control your abilities. You're interfering with ship operations. He took a deep breath and the power stabilized. Sorry, it's still new. This is exactly what the Council fears, Vexi said. Humans who can't control power that could destroy entire civilizations. Our ancestors controlled it, Lisa said. We can learn. Your ancestors also chose to give it up, Zaltek pointed out. Perhaps for good reason. Jake closed his eyes and reached out with his enhanced senses, feeling the pulse of the galaxy around him. Billions of humans undergoing the same transformation, all connected through the ancient memory web that was coming back online. He could sense their confusion, their wonder, their growing awareness of what they had become. But he could also sense something else, the wisdom of their ancestors embedded in the genetic patterns that were reshaping them. The Council is voting, he said, opening his eyes, whether to attempt military action against human settlements. How can you know that? Zalthek demanded. I can hear their communications, all of them. Jake looked around the bridge at the aliens who had been his colleagues and friends. They're terrified. They think we're going to conquer the galaxy like our ancestors did. Are you? Dr. Nixara asked quietly. The 3 humans exchanged looks, and in that moment the weight of their species' future seemed to settle on their shoulders. We could, Rick said finally. The power is there. The knowledge is returning. Within months we could rebuild the empire our ancestors abandoned. But we won't, Lisa added. Because we remember why they gave it up in the first place. Jake nodded. Our ancestors didn't fall from power. They chose to step back because they realized that dominance isn't the same as greatness. Then what? Do you want? Zalthek asked. What we've always wanted, Jake replied. To be treated as equals, to contribute to galactic civilization without being mocked or dismissed. You're hardly equals now, Vexi said. You're far beyond any other species. In capability, maybe, but not in wisdom. That's something we have to earn. The bridge communicator crackled with an incoming transmission from Coalition Command. This is Fleet Admiral Thissaran to all ships in the human containment perimeter. The Council has voted. All humans are to be relocated to designated reserve worlds pending further evaluation. Jake felt anger surge through the memory web as enhanced humans across the galaxy received the same message. The power of their collective emotion sent ripples through space itself, affecting systems on thousands of ships. They want to put us in cages, Rick said, his voice tight with controlled rage. They're afraid, Dr. Nixara said. Can you blame them? Yes, Lisa said firmly. We've done nothing to threaten anyone. We've shown nothing but restraint since our abilities manifested. Jake raised his hand and the others fell silent. He was receiving something through the memory web, a message from the collective unconscious of his species. There's another way, he said finally. Our ancestors left instructions, not just for restoration, but for integration. He moved to the bridge's main console and began typing commands that bypassed all security protocols. The ship's systems responded to his enhanced abilities as if he were speaking their native language. Jake, what are you doing? Zalthek asked, opening a channel to every ship in the Coalition fleet and to the Council chambers on Arcturus Prime. View screen activated, showing Jake's image being broadcast to millions of beings across the galaxy. He looked directly into the camera, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of 50,000 years of human heritage. People of the Coalition, he began. My name is Jake Morrison, captain in the Coalition Defense Force, and descendant of those you call the Ancients. He paused, letting that sink in. 3 days ago, my people were the species you laughed at, the primitives you barely tolerated. Today, we are what we always were, the children of the beings who ruled this galaxy before your civilizations existed. Across the galaxy, Coalition leaders watched in stunned silence. But we are not our ancestors. We have learned from their mistakes. We know that power without wisdom leads to stagnation, that dominance without partnership creates emptiness. Jake looked around the bridge at the alien faces watching him, seeing fear giving way to something else. Hope, perhaps. We don't want to rule you. We want to join you. Not as your superiors, but as your partners. We offer our abilities, our knowledge, our heritage in service to the galaxy we all share. He leaned forward and his voice carried both promise and warning. But we will not be caged. We will not be dismissed. We will not return to being the species everyone mocks. We are human. We have always been human. And now we remember what that means. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Outside, Jake could sense the coalition fleets holding position, their commanders uncertain how to respond. Think they'll accept? Rick asked. Jake smiled, feeling the collective consciousness of his species settling into new patterns. Not the hive mind of their ancestors, but something better. A network of individuals who chose cooperation over domination. They don't have much choice, he said. We're not going anywhere. On the view screen, the coalition fleet formations were beginning to change. Ships that had been in attack positions were standing down, their commanders realizing that the age of human subjugation was over. Dr. Nixara floated closer to the three enhanced humans. What happens now? Jake looked out at the stars, at the galaxy his ancestors had once ruled and chosen to abandon. Now it was his generation's turn to decide what humanity's place would be among the cosmic community. Now we build something new, he said. Something better than empire, something our ancestors would be proud of. The myths had been real all along, but the future would be something entirely different.